Hello, and welcome to the Magic Moments podcast with myself, Dan Harvey, and my wife, Kizzy Harvey. In these podcasts, we seek to discuss, debate, and learn about the things that truly matter. These conversations are meant for a mature audience, as is the language. If you have a delicate mentality or sensitive ears, you may be triggered. All views expressed here are our own opinions, even when quoting facts, and we do not expect you to take what is said here at face value. All information should be critically assessed and researched before coming to a final conclusion. Your personal intuition always takes primary importance. And finally, while we encourage debate and discussion in the truth discovery process, being disrespectful or being unreasonably disruptive will not be tolerated. Words are powerful, words can change your life, and once you see, you cannot unsee.
Hello!
Hello!
Oh, it's always so awkward. Okay, guys, so if you can hear us, please pop something in the comments. What have you been up to today? And let us know, and then we'll know that everything's working. If we're not here live and you're catching up either on Facebook somewhere or maybe on our YouTube channel, then please feel free to join in with the comments. It helps immensely. And we do check them and look through them and all of that jazz, because doing this in this format rather than a podcast that you just listen to is partly because you guys wanted that interactive stuff. So please do interact.
Yeah.
Because I do my hair and makeup for this.
I put on trousers for this now, I'm joking.
What do you mean you're joking? You're naked?
No, I saying I was already wearing trousers.
You was always wearing trousers.
Yes.
I thought you meant you're joking about wearing trousers.
It's like the newsreaders, they may or may not wear trousers.
There's Hannah. Can you hear us all right, my love? Yeah, we all look okay? Look okay? Sound okay? I knocked the microphone, so Dan's paranoid now.
Whether you can hear us, yeah.
Yeah, that I've done something.
So, what I'm going to do is just a very brief recap for of what we did, because it's a two-parter. I'm going to do a brief recap, just a very quick mention of all the things we talked about. I'm not going to go to any detail whatsoever on those, just a mention of what we did. And if you want to watch that, you can go and watch it on YouTube now, isn't that right? It's up on YouTube?
Yes. Yeah, don't get ahead of yourself. I've not done my news yet.
Oh, you've got news, have you?
Yeah, well...
What is your news? I don't know your news.
No, I know. My news is just basically me bragging.
Go on then.
So
do your news.
Look. I made a wreath!
Hey!
Look at that beautiful wreath.
Which now sits on our bench outside getting wet.
Is it still... Well, it's the wind. Is it still in one piece?
Yes, it's still in one piece.
I need to get something to secure it to the door. I'm going to hang it on the annex door. And funny enough, Emma, Hunter's nan, she bought this little angel wings like decoration, which I'm going to hang on the wreath. I just think it'd be nice when we look down to the annex, whereas you don't see your own front door, and we don't even go through our front door, do we?
No, we use a side door, so yeah, that would be good.
So this is a fresh wreath. Like I made it all, the whole thing. It just started with a wire ring. That's all it started with. And so I did everything. All that foliage I put in by hand. It didn't come like that, like with the Christmas tree bit round. I had to do it all myself.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
I thought that's what you'd done.
Well, Tracy thought that we were going to get the wreath and then we just decorated it.
Right.
But we had to like get moss and everything, like, and pack it in. And you bought me some posh snippy things, didn't you?
What everyone borrowed.
Yes, because they were lovely. Well, thank you, Hannah. Well, thank you, Jade. So yes, that's my news. My news was just to brag about my wreath.
What a lovely wreath.
And my other, let me get rid of that. My other thing to say is, I mucked up. So I was so smug last week because Dan was like, look, I think we need to see if people want a notification because I'm getting messages to say people are missing it. I was like, okay. So I like instantly did it. made up this like page and everything, link, and that, but yeah, I did it all wrong. So now everyone is just subscribed into one place. So whereas really Mindset Magic is different than Magic Moments, although they're linked.
Yeah, well, it was just a notification for when the podcast was going to come on, because a lot of people miss it because they just forget or whatever.
Yes.
So they were asking for a notification, but you put them onto the main thing where they'll get messages about all the other things that you do.
Yeah, so I need to sort all that out.
Right.
And think again.
So if you just got here, or you're watching on a catch up because you missed it, that's why.
Yeah. But we do have a YouTube, which is, you can just search Mindset Magick, and we've only got how many hours do we need? 3,000 watched hours. Yeah, so we've only got 2,950 to go now.
Right. Oh, well, that's good. We've done 50 hours in a week.
So please, if you can just play us in the background on mute, yeah, because then we can have an actual membership bit, so that people can actually be like a member.
We get more features.
Yeah, so it's better for everyone. Right. Anyway, yeah, off you go.
Okay.
I feel like a newsreader.
So the brief recap is we talked about two core pathways to anxiety, the cortex and thinking, and we talked about the amygdala and the physical. We talked about GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder, and the three components. And we talked about chronic worry, and we talked about the physical side, which is being tense and you can't relax. And we talk about the behavioral, which is avoidance and seeking reassurance. And we talked briefly on those. I didn't cover the physical, which we'll do today. And today we're just going to add some more detail on some of that and cover the physical side of anxiety, as well as talking about the things that you can do to manage or reduce or control anxiety. And if you've got anything that works for you, you can always put that on there. Let us know what you guys do.
Hey, Della.
Hello. Oh, funny enough, she's just come on. I think she was the lady that was talking about the motorway.
Yes.
So last week we covered the chronic overthinking, and we also mentioned the behaviors of avoidance and reassurance. That is to say that you avoid anything you feel that is going to make you anxious. The resolve can only be to be mindful when this is happening and to challenge yourself to do it, which is what we talked about then. And in so doing, find out that in reality, it is nowhere near the imagined sort of pain or difficulty you thought it was going to be. So that's what we was talking about. And someone did mention the motorway, which is that lady. And we talked about social events. So that's what we covered in the first one.
So when I was making my notes for this, I scrolled back through my posts that I was doing on my Life with Kizzy Facebook page. So I don't really post on there. So you'd only have to scroll probably about 10 or 12 posts because I started to use that as an anxiety kind of blog.
Right.
Because I found it really hard. I wanted to really talk about it because that's who I am, very open. But I was so low with it and so struggling that I just felt like it was so miserable. And I'm not used to having a social media that's like that. I'm more used to having a social media that's, I guess, more inspiring. So I started to use that page. So anyway, I scrolled down because I wanted to just make sure I hadn't missed anything that I'd been talking about. And on there was a post about, so I used to struggle to take Hunter to swimming. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Like really bad. I used to sit in the change room. I couldn't even go into the cafe bit. I used to hide in the changing rooms for the whole half hour. Like, to me, it's alien now that I was that person. But anyway, I'd done this post to say I nearly didn't go because my anxiety, the dread of it was so bad. But of course, he's so darn cute and I can't let him down. So he kind of forced the issue, really. If it was for me, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
But because it was for him, I did it. And then I wrote afterwards that it wasn't as bad as I thought.
Yeah. It can never be as bad as you think.
No.
Because obviously you're in that sort of catastrophizing thought pattern where it's going to be horrible. It's going to be disaster. It's going to be the worst thing you've ever done. So it can't possibly live up to that hype, can it?
No, and I'd kind of I knew that I struggled to go to swimming, Like I knew that was a thing. I could tell you all the things that I struggled with when my anxiety was at its worst, but I just didn't. I'd sort of forgotten that that very thing of if you do it, it's. And there was something about me going into a charity shop as well. Took me a year to go into a charity shop. Yeah.
And what was you expecting to happen? What did you think in your mind was going to happen if you went into the charity shop?
Well, every time I would go near a charity shop, I would get extremely dizzy and very woozy. So then I would think,
was it just charity shops or all shops?
No, I mean it was kind of all shops,
right.
But I had this.
That'd be weirdly specific. Just charity shops.
I'm really anxious of charity shops.
Yeah, or like if you walk past the bookies and you're just like, ugh.
No, what it was is because I really wanted to go into the charity shops around here, and I wanted. Like me and Mum were going to do it. Then Mum died.
So it's got a connection to your mother.
Yes.
So maybe
there was like some grief involved in going into the charity shop as well as the anxiety. So I would, and I've wrote about this, not the grief bit, but about how I would go really woozy and I'd just be too dizzy to go in and breathless. And, it's basically the start of a panic attack. But I learned to manage those. And even now, sometimes I get them, don't I? And I know I've nailed it now. So I'm going to go into that. That's my little bit at the end, isn't it?
Okay.
Can you send me your YouTube link? Try to find it, and I couldn't. Yes, of course. There's a list of people that are waiting for the YouTube. I've not been. Well, I've been busy this week, haven't I? But just
and next week's going to be super busy. But
I'll do it.
You're definitely going to do it because you do assign time to work, don't you? Sometimes.
Yeah. A lot of time.
So you could do it in that sort of moment.
Tomorrow's a worky day.
Well, there you go. So it could be tomorrow.
Well, what I do is I forget. Let me write it on my list. I've got my book right here.
I'm going to write it on the list.
Because there's a million things in my brain.
Sort out the notifications thing.
That's on my list anyway. Look, where is it?
And put out the YouTube link.
Sort podcast subscriber list. There we go.
There you go. So it's on the list.
Oh, no, it's on my list.
It's already on the list.
It was on my list. Let me just make sure I write Della in case she didn't comment on it. What else did you say? Oh yeah, upload to YouTube. Upload to YouTube. I need like a basic yeah. I have a very chaotic brain, don't I, love?
You do.
Well, I've done that to Chris. Anyway, sorry.
Right, so.
Oh, I've lost my anxiety notes now. Right, you go.
Okay, so let's move on to the first part of what is actually today then, because we've sort of briefly covered what we said last time. So we're going to talk about the second behavior is reassurance. I'm going to read this thing out because there's a whole paragraph. I'm going to read it out and then we'll talk about it. So the second behavior is reassurance, which in brackets over protective with your kids, constantly checking in with loved ones, controlling people for your own protection or feelings of emotional safety, right? Because if you're controlling someone, then they're doing the things you want them to do, and then they can't affect your emotions, and that makes you feel better and less anxious, because otherwise, if they were uncontrolled, God knows what they could do or say. So to tackle this, as with all anxiety feeds, as in things that feed anxiety, we have to train ourselves to become mindful of when we are acting anxiously, monitoring our own behaviors and challenging ourselves to do the things that we fear, which we spoke about last week when we talked about jumping on the motorway, planning a route, and making sure that whatever it is that we're scared of in that, and for that lady, it was the motorway, whatever it is that is giving us anxiety or fear, that we push ourselves to go through that and you can do it in a very planned, coordinated way. So it doesn't have to be completely, oh crap, you can set it up yourself to be in your best interest. In the case of reassurance, that would be letting the kids run free, knowing that bumps are part of childhood, as is a trip to A&E. Stop checking in on loved ones. Whatever you fear may happen to them or worry about what they may be doing, it will not be changed by you checking in on them. And you checking in on them may potentially make whatever you fear more likely. Right? If you're constantly checking in on someone, distracting someone, it depends what you're anxious about, right? If you're anxious about your bloke might cheat on you or something, or if you're anxious about, you consider your partner to be useless in some form or other and can't possibly go to the shop and get all the things on the list, or whatever it may be, whatever you're anxious about, and some of these concerns may be valid, you checking in on them is not going to improve that. It's more likely to make it worse, right? So if you can have these thoughts in advance, if you can have these thoughts at the time, if you can have this rational thinking process in place, if you can practice these rational thinking processes when you're in a good place rather than waiting until it goes bad and your anxiety is high, and that makes it more difficult to start thinking in that kind of way. So if you can practice these things in the normal day to day, so that when you come to that anxious moment, it's already installed piece of software in your mind, then it's much more likely that you're going to succeed with that. Being mindful and being acknowledging of when you're going to be doing these triggers, when these things are going to be happening, and trying to fight against them, trying to do something about it. Because obviously these things affect you, but they also affect the other people in your life. Know that you cannot control other people's actions or behavior except in a very temporary and shallow way. But you can exhaust yourself emotionally in the attempt to control people. Do you want a life of exhausting anxiety in the futile attempts to control others through fear of being hurt in some way or other? Control is illusion. So that's the whole thing that I wrote there. So there are people that you may be aware of. It may not be you, it may be other people in your situation around you that are in controlling in this way. And it's, it's, you might have negative thoughts about them for this reason, right? But there might be reasons behind this anxiety to do with self-protection, to do with anxiety about being hurt, anxiety about things that have happened to them in the past that they have allowed, and everyone's responsible for themselves, but they have allowed that to possess them, if you like, that to control them and to influence their behaviors. And it might be affecting you. You might be the receiving end rather than the person who's perpetrating here. And if that's something in your life, then let us know. But that is the things to consider and think about. And you can do proactively is becoming mindful of what your triggers are, your behaviors are, and acting before they occur, before you're in the situation.
Can I just say that there's also control in a non-malicious way?
Yes,
like
not necessarily talking about malicious ways.
No,
here.
You always make it sound so ominous.
Okay, that's a skill of mine. Yeah, it's not necessarily ominous. It can be very sort of subtle, and it can be that person is unaware that this is what they are doing. This is subconscious
can I give
behavior.
an example?
You sure?
So Hunter, when Penny came over, so Penny's his best friend or their boyfriend and girlfriend or whatever they are. They just super love each other. Yeah, they're gonna get married. They're both 6. So when Penny came over, Penny's very strong-willed and knows her own mind, and she's the only child, just like Hunt. Well, she's got her half sisters, but they're a lot older, so she's like an only child really, and they don't live there. Like Hunter, and so only children obviously are used to ruling the roost. And so when Penny came over, Hunter tried to control the situation, didn't he?
Manically.
Yeah, and it led to him having numerous little mini breakdowns and tears,
which he does not normally have. He's not a tantrum kind of kid. He doesn't often get sort of emotionally out of control. He can get overexcited, but he doesn't normally get emotionally out of control.
And he wasn't having meltdowns as in he was upset. It was like affecting him in that way, wasn't it? But actually that was just through him trying to control someone else.
Yes.
Or trying to control the situation. And so when Dan's talking about control, he's not just talking about like the obvious when people are controlling. It is that where we, because of our anxiety, try and control a situation, but actually
to reduce your anxiety, or control it,
but actually adds to the anxiety, because you can't predict what others are what others are going to do, what others are going to say, where people are going to sit. I mean, we had it, with Hunter, and it's likely that this is anxiety based on his past trauma.
Yeah.
That if I put his breakfast in the wrong place, I mean, I know that can be a toddler thing, but there's that element in there that we've seen where he's got a thing in his head, and you can be like that, can't you? And that would be your social anxiety.
Yeah, I used to have. I'm not so bad now, but I used to have social anxiety. And that's more to do, that cross references a little bit with you can have feelings of anxiety because it kind of links in with embarrassment a little bit. So anxiety about being embarrassed in situations.
Yeah.
So I had that basically, but only through your help in a way, i.e., being forced into social situations against my will at all times,
and embarrassing situations,
and being forced to be embarrassed and coming out the other side of it and being okay.
Because I'm just like a walking non-embarrassed.
Well, I'm just very private and keep all my business to myself, even though I'm doing a podcast here. But I normally am quite private and keep my business to myself. And you have to get to know me before I'll sort of go personal. And Kizzy's the exact opposite, the least closed that you can possibly be. Open doesn't do it justice. She will happily explain the most unbelievable details of the most private part of her life to anyone that she meets at the bus stop.
There isn't much I wouldn't tell someone. No. I don't see
and there's nothing wrong with that.
There's no need from my perspective.
Each way is their own, right? Each to their own thing. So it's not a judgment of that. I'm just saying that is the case.
So that used to give you anxiety, didn't it? That I was just going to blurt stuff out.
Oh, well, the stuff you say, yeah. So there's no filter. So there's compromise in a relationship, right? So she has to be compromising to and just basically pay some kind of credence to the fact that I'm a private person, and I also have to accept that she's an open person. I have to compromise somewhere in the middle, right? So that's what we do, but that's not an easy thing, but it requires balance, and sometimes it goes wrong one way or the other. But because of that, my anxiety was reduced because I was constantly being exposed to the things that was causing me anxiety, which is social situations and embarrassment. And both of those things went together quite happily quite a lot of the time. And that was especially in my sort of 20s and 30s, and now 42. It's not such a big thing now. I'm not bothered in most situations now, and I'm nowhere near as easily embarrassed as I used to be.
Well, and your anxiety is decreased also, not only because of exposure, but because you aren't trying to because you aren't you stopped trying to control what I said, because you used to be like, don't say this, don't say that, don't do this, don't do that.
Yeah, in the first few years, rather than confront the situation, I was trying to avoid avoidance behavior to prevent the situation from happening, rather than just taking the sort of it on the chin, as it were, and just right, let's toughen up and get this sort of so that's not an issue. And that's not an easy thing to do or even understand and accept in the first place. It takes a bit of time to actually sit and think about that, to come to those conclusions, which is why, I'm 42 now and I know it, but I didn't know it in my 20s, sort of thing.
Yeah. The second thing I want to put to people about anxiety and for them to think on is something that I've seen, something that I've done, and maybe we all do it. And that is where you project your anxiety onto others because you're anxious about what they could be doing. And so so a little bit, so it's like Hunter, right? Hunter's just like a really, really good example of things that he could do that could. So I know some people that, like, for example, and this isn't a judgment. This is just observation and something to think about. Hunter went on beaver camp at 6 years old with his traumatic background on the first week of joining beavers, didn't he?
Yes, pretty much.
And we knew that was going to be tough for him,
potentially triggering.
And he came back and said that's it. He's never going to beavers again, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
but he got over it.
He's gone every week.
Yeah, and he loves it now. Absolutely loves it. But I know some people that have yet to let their children go on beaver camp.
Right. Because they've got anxiety about their kid being on the beaver camp.
Because of their anxiety. It's not
rather
the kid,
than
is
the
it?
kid's anxiety.
But they think it's protecting the child.
But it's protecting themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's other circumstances, adult situations like that, where people are not doing things or, not allowing participation in things or whatever, because they believe that they're protecting that person, but actually it's their anxiety.
They're protecting their own anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I see it as well with teenagers and things like that. And what I would say is that think about your experiences in life, the things that have been difficult, the things that have been hard, the things that have been hurtful and upsetting. And I bet from that, there's always a lesson. There's always something you've gained. You may have lost a partner in one hand because, your relationship broke up and that was heartbreaking. And in the other hand, you gained the relationship you're in now that is the best that you've ever had, like that kind of circumstance.
Yeah, and with your ex-partner might be that whatever happened in that relationship has created in you a certain change or strength or understanding or knowledge, whatever you want to call it, that has enabled you to now be in this relationship that you're in now. And that without that experience, you would be a different person and would not be the right fit for this relationship that you're in.
Yeah.
Potentially. Yeah, that kind of thing. I'm on board with that.
So you be mindful, because when you are doing that, trying to protect people through your own anxiety, you're robbing them. You're robbing, like, imagine if your parents would have stopped you through their own anxiety from going to live in Wales with your ex-girlfriend. Then we would have never got married and had Hunter, and they would have robbed this life. Now, we don't know, you could have had a way better life, but like, in
true.
theory, like, how could you? But yeah, in theory, like, you're then potentially, like, if we'd have stopped Hunter going to Beaver Camp through our own fears of what it might do to him, we'd have robbed him from that experience, that memory, that resilience. Now this Saturday he's doing a beaver sleepover, isn't he? That he's like absolutely buzzing about. Whereas imagine if we'd have kept avoiding it, and then all of a sudden he's at a point where he wants to go. His own anxiety is actually then increased.
What? And then aren't you literally installing anxiety software into his mind?
Yeah.
If we were to like be so anxious about it
Well,
and
if we
just
said
so
that as
fearful,
well.
and we're saying to him, "Oh no, you can't go to Beaver Camp because this could happen or that could happen," and then we're literally we would be training him to be exactly the same, so that when he gets older, he's scared to do anything.
Yeah.
Scared to try anything.
So, like, it's like spiders, isn't it? Like, I try to. So Hunter will let a spider run all over him. So I try not to react to spiders. I mean, I'm not actually that scared of spiders, but
try not to like overreact to things.
No. Which is hard though, because remember when we saw that snake in the road and I screamed and nearly swerved the car?
I nearly crashed the car in the ditch. Yeah.
I don't like snakes. I didn't know I didn't like snakes either. Anyway, so that's my thing on. And it's quite a complex thing to think about and realize that you're doing it.
Well,
because it's through love, isn't it?
Well, most of the time you're not even conscious you do it. It's not a conscious thing that like, oh, I'm deciding that through my own anxieties I'm going to prevent my child from having experiences. It's not like you think that. Obviously not. It's just purely that, in that anxiety, it literally shuts off your neocortex, the front part of your brain, and the thinking part, the creative part of your brain is switched off, and your amygdala, which is the most primitive part of the brain, which doesn't think and just reacts, is activated. So that's it's also always an automatic response when that kind of thing happens. So all you can do is try to be as conscious as you can when you're making decisions about that kind of thing. I mean, we just use Hunter as an example. It could be about anything, not necessarily child stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about the physical anxiety component, because that's the only thing we haven't talked about yet. So, or we briefly covered it, but we haven't gone into any detail on yet. So the physical anxiety component. So back in the caveman days, it was perfectly reasonable to be anxious about walking across to the river to get the water that you needed, when you know that there's a tiger that likes to hang around there, right? It's going to be quite anxiety feeding if you're worried about being dead and mauled to death. If that tiger were to jump out at you, all kinds of alarm systems in your body would trigger due to the surprise, the noise, the sudden movement, the feeling of the immediate danger to your life, right? So you be worried about going there. If there's actually a tiger there, it's going to set off all these alarms, all these physical processes, all the chemicals, all the cortisol, and everything's going to go through your veins, right? If you survived, you would develop anxiety about needing to put yourself into that situation again. but you would know why you felt that way. It's obvious if there's a tiger there that the reason you're feeling the way you're feeling is because there's a tiger there, right? Back in the day. But today, we are triggered by noise, sudden movement, and surprise and fear of immediate danger just by walking around the town centre shopping, right? But because it's more subtle and because it tends to be less of a sudden thing and more of a constant background high stress level, so it's not like a tiger's jumping out at you, but you're watching the roads. You might have a kid with you. You're making sure they're not killing themselves in some way, jumping off something or falling down something or running across the road. You've got nasty people to look out for. You see, a group of people that look, dangerous, let's say. If it's Christmas right now, you're going around there. It's really stressful to shop at Christmas. There's so many people around. Some people are anxious about crowds, about being crushed, about being trapped. There's all kinds of things that can create stress and anxiety. Claustrophobia, yeah. Ew. Just in modern day life, but it's not a tiger. So you're getting all these little triggers and all these little things that are giving you all these feelings, but there's no thing there, an object, physical, that you can hang it on and say, oh, that's why I feel this way, right? So there's a bit of a disconnect nowadays between what is affecting you, right? So we don't associate physical things being created by the world that we feel with anxiety. So we're not connecting the two, right? There is a disconnect between the trigger and the anxiety event. You can have a panic attack without knowing why you're having a panic attack. There doesn't seem to be a trigger. So in the old days, there's a tiger, it creates fear and anxiety, but then the tiger is gone and your body returns to normal, right? So there's a trigger, it creates all the things it creates in you, but then the tiger goes away. So your brain goes, tiger gone. All the things calm down. You relax again because the tiger's no longer threatening you, right? But now you have, in the modern day world, you have a constant triggering, but at a lower level. It's constantly in the background. It's always there and it's constantly triggering you, and you're having all these feelings, all the stress and the worry. But it will sometimes trigger a panic attack, but you can't switch off the panic attack because there's no off switch, because there's no tiger going away. The feelings stay constant. Okay. So because the tiger can't go away, because and there's no object there threatening you, and because that doesn't go away, the trigger doesn't switch off again. So it's just left on. So then the next time you go out, you've already got this heightened anxiety and stress and fear and whatnot of wherever it is. And the next time you go out, you raise the bar again. And then the next time, again, to the point where you can't go out anymore, you can't do it anymore, or you have a panic attack. That's the natural expression. Your body wants to get it out. Like, there's something going on. I don't know what it is, but I'm upset. I can't find the tiger, but I know there is one. There must be, because I can feel it. So that's the physical side of anxiety and how anxiety can be created through seemingly nothing.
That's what I found really difficult. Was number one, that the more anxious I got, then I was anxious about being anxious, like that vicious circle.
Anxiety about anxiety.
Yeah, like that vicious circle of it escalating. And then the second thing is, you well know, is that me not being able to pinpoint the trigger, like me not understanding why I could do something that I enjoyed. I could go somewhere I liked. I could be sat in our house doing nothing. And like, do you remember when I had that really bad one when we were watching TV?
Yeah.
That like really
just watching
really
TV, nothing
one.
was going on. Everything was relatively chilled, at least from my perspective.
Well, yeah, and it came out of the blue. That was, I'm going to talk about that in a bit when I talk about what helps. But that felt like it came out of the blue. What were we watching? We were watching a series, weren't we, that we were loving?
Yeah, we were watching something we liked, yes.
Yeah, anyway. Yeah, and like, oh, that was horrible. That makes me feel sick thinking about that. It was such a bad panic attack. Panic attack.
Well, and there was that time where you basically said goodbye as well.
Yeah, that one. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, that one, right? Yeah, where you
said, because I honestly
goodbye. Here's all my passwords. See you in the next life.
Yeah, because it was so bad. Like, it could have only been like, it was so physical. It was, yeah. I felt like it was the culmination of all the things that I'd been feeling in my body. Everyone was telling me it was anxiety, and then it it was like this massive thing had gone off in my body. I thought like I thought like all my blood vessels were bursting.
Mm.
That's what it felt like physically. And I thought, oh my god, there was something wrong with me all along. Bye.
Mm.
It was horrible.
That is
Horrible.
the
And I did something wrong that day, which I'm going to talk about when I talk about how to nail this.
okay.
No. Yeah.
But that is the Tiger Come, Tiger Go, which I'm going to call it from now on. Tiger Come, Tiger Go. That is on and off switch for physical anxiety. If there's no Tiger Come, Tiger Go, then there is no off switch for anxiety. That is why there is a constant high anxiety, which you may or may not be aware of until now. If that's new to you, let me know. But that is a situation that can occur. So I'm going to make a mention of chronic worry feeders, right? So let's see if this is you. I know at least one of these is you. I think both of these describe you as well.
Me?
Yeah, you.
Oh, I thought you were talking to them, but then I thought, actually, who are you speaking to? Can we just go back to the tiger thing a minute?
Go on then.
So I just found it like really interesting last week when we talked about nowadays tigers, like the whole social media, all the things in our world that set those alarms off. Like I just find that gave me real food for thought about how triggering the world that we live in is. And what to do about that. And also the tiger on, tiger off switch. Like I think I've got a semi tiger off switch, like hack.
Okay.
And so I should say that. Right, go on then. What do you think's me?
So these are feeders of chronic worry: perfectionism and over responsibility. So perfectionism, I'll say perfectionism.
Yeah, not perfectionism.
Yeah, that doesn't no. Perfectionism. There's a word that I have difficulty with. I shall have to try and perfect it. Anyway, it is setting impossibly high standards or demanding perfection, which creates certain failure, which then creates pressure and stress. So some people, this doesn't apply to everyone, but this is one feeder of chronic worry, is the feeling the need to be perfect in whether it be your job or as a mother or whatever it is the roles that you have in life. You have to be perfect in those roles. You're basically over demanding of yourself, and you don't give yourself any leeway. And so obviously if you have to be perfect, and as no one is perfect, that is certain failure. So the certain failure, if you're always failing, obviously that's not going to be good for your mental health. It's not going to be good for your anxiety or anything else in general, especially when it's completely self-driven pressure and stress. And the over-responsibility side of it is you take on roles or jobs possibly linked to your desire for control, right? Because if you're doing all the jobs, you're in control of all the jobs, when they're done, when they're not done, and how well they're done. You burn out with the stress and anxiety of not wanting to disappoint yourself or other people, and possibly because you want to do the perfect job. So they can be sort of linked together a little bit. So again, that's attempting to control others and situations and micromanaging situations. And when you do micromanage all these things, that is obviously exhausting and creates anxiety, because it's exhausting enough and anxiety driving enough just to consider your own needs, wants, and desires and things you're trying to do in life. If you're micromanaging 3 or 4 other people in your life and all their needs, wants, and desires, obviously that's going to drive you to despair. And some people do that, don't they, Kizzy? So that can be a thing where anxiety is sort of you can be unaware that you're sort of creating your own anxiety, because some anxiety happens to you, right, from the outside world, and some anxiety is created from within, from yourself, from what you think or do, or your behaviors, or situations that you allow to exist. And as I say, other things come from outside that you cannot control, which is where this over control comes from, I think, because some people don't deal very well with not being in control of things. It's bad enough that there's lots of things out there they can't control, so they overcompensate by then And again, this is not in any kind of nasty way. This can all be below the surface. They are unaware that they're even doing this, but they feel the need to control, because controlling life, controlling people, controlling events controls anxiety, controls what is going to affect them. So they're very often, all these things are linked together, and they're all feeders. They're all sort of circuits that all feed each other. Shall we read some comments before we go on?
Yeah. So Hannah said, anxiety totally makes me try and control things. And Laura said that she's really enjoying this session. And anxiety of anxiety plus anxiety of taking tablets. Oh my God, I can relate to that. I had anxiety about having anxiety, and then they put me on propranolol, which is beta blockers, and the anxiety for taking those, wasn't it, love? I took them in like emergent, because I just swore that my heart was going to stop, because they slow your heart rate down.
You had anxiety about taking chemicals.
Yes, absolutely. I had anxiety about
which is why you try and take natural things, isn't it? Because you don't really trust the chemicals, which is fair enough. And Laura mentions the CBT, which we're going to mention as well.
Yes.
That worked for her. We are going to mention that in a moment.
What I would say about, so perfectionism over responsibility, totally me. Totally was me. And I think born of a narcissistic father.
Yeah, narcissism comes back.
Again, because
narcissists have massive influences on people, for sure.
Yeah, because I had to be perfect, like for him. And the over responsibility, the control probably comes from the fact that my childhood was out of control.
Yeah.
Very chaotic.
Very natural response to then want to take control when you get the power to.
And neglectful.
Yeah.
And we see that in Hunter, don't we? We see, and especially first of all, wasn't it? Like he wanted to control everything.
Yes,
because keeps you safe.
That's what he does with his food. He controls his food.
Yeah.
That's his one hang-up left over from all that, is that he likes to control his food, what he will and won't eat, and how it's cooked, and he's very. It's not down to taste, right? That kid will eat a bogey off the floor, but he won't eat a chip if it's the wrong chip. So it's nothing to do with he likes or dislikes.
Yeah, we thought
foods.
It was sensory phobia, didn't we? But it's not.
It's purely control, which is not him consciously doing it. He's not thinking, I want to upset you by making you cook some food that yesterday he liked, but today he doesn't like. It's purely about his feelings around control, feelings around feeling safe, and anxiety. So he has anxiety because he didn't feel safe. He had long situations and long periods where he didn't feel safe, and he didn't feel like any of his needs would be met. And that installed, let's call it anxiety software in his brain, whatever you want to call it, installed apps that we are attempting all the time to uninstall. But there's little sort of segments of them left over that are difficult to reach.
So in my childhood, at 7, I was cooking my own meals. Often I would come home to an empty house. Don't know at 7, probably a little bit older, but not much older. I wouldn't know what mood my dad would be in, or what I'd be facing with him. So that would obviously create anxiety. Yeah. And also my parents were very open too. And so I knew
a lot of adult things.
Yeah. So, and my dad, there was problems in my mum and dad's marriage, and my dad told me and used me as a pawn in that game, really.
As a weapon.
A weapon, yeah. So I knew things that had gone on that no 4 or 5-year-old should know. And then like we had bailiffs and stuff. So I knew all my parents' financials at 5, at 6, 7.
So, guys, if you are wondering where did your anxiety come from, you might even think it was created recently, and it might be true that it might be created recently, or it could be, if you really think back to some kind of traumas that you've had in your life, was that the seed of it? Was that the birth of it? Is there been times in your life where you've had feelings of being unsafe for long periods of time, or feelings of when you were much younger as a child that your needs would not be met? You didn't perhaps know where you're going to be fed next or whatever, because all these things can create circuits in your brain which might not be used for a long time, but then all of a sudden are triggered, and those circuits are activated when you get older. some kind of event mirrors those events in some way, but you don't make that conscious connection. But your body keeps the score and knows those connections and remembers those connections, and they're activated so that you get the physical response of the anxiety. You may have had that anxiety the first time when you were 4, 5, 6, 7. You may have got the trauma anxiety installed then, and it didn't activate until you're 21, 30, 40. And all of a sudden, something triggers the same pathway in your brain, and you release the same feelings at the exact as the same feelings that you had when you were 4, 5, or 6, whatever. And it mirrors that, but you don't make the conscious connection because you haven't got a memory of that. You've forgotten about that situation, or it's buried or whatever. But because you've then had this triggering, your body remembers and is acted the same way, and now you can't make the link. There's no tiger.
Or like your nervous system, you calm your nervous system down,
Yeah.
and then something happens that triggers it again. And so I got sexually assaulted by the taxi driver, didn't I? And that caused, what was it, about 18 months later, I had a breakdown. Took a long time.
The first 6 months you were on the outside anyway, totally fine on the outside.
Well, I was numb. I know now, like I remember that so vividly, being like, what's everyone worried about?
What's everyone upset about?
Why is
Yeah, I'm
everyone
fine.
so upset?
Mm.
Like, it was weird. Yeah, I was disassociating with myself, like, which
Yeah.
I realize now. But yeah, so that triggered the first bout, right? And then that was really bad and led to, like, all the bad stuff. And then I think that I then kept a low level or medium level of survival mode from that point on. Like, I recovered to a certain degree, and then I learned to live with, like, if I look back and I look at some of my behaviors and I look at some of the way that I was and the way that I lived my life and how I feel peace now versus back then, I can see that I wasn't fully recovered. And although I wasn't suffering panic attacks or anything like that, I was in this, like, survival mode. And then mum's death and the trauma of that, and dad, that was the tipping point again, that woke it all up.
Well,
really bad.
There's a link between and we'll cover it on the other side when we talk about narcissism when we do that live. But there's a link between anxiety and the narcissism, because obviously with your father, guys, this is not just specific to Kizzy. This is anyone, right? If you've got a narcissist in your life, especially if they're a parental figure narcissist, it's quite likely or quite possible that you live or have lived in a survival mode kind of setting, because those people are basically, have you ever seen a Western where they shoot bullets at your feet to make you dance, right? Well, a narcissist does that for your entire life. They're mentally shooting bullets at your feet the whole time they're alive, and they're always trying to make you dance, okay, to their tune that they want. And that's exhausting, especially over a lifetime. And Kizzy's dad was probably a narcissist, a created narcissist, and he obviously as a father figure to you, and your mum was working mostly, so he was mostly your carer.
Yeah.
So he was not a safe attachment for you, and he always made you feel sort of like you didn't know how he was going to be, right? One minute he could have a raging temper, or the next minute he could be the best friend, charismatic father, and you didn't know what he was going to be.
Yeah.
So any sudden change of behavior must be frightening for a child, like to that degree. And so obviously for you, he was very demanding, always had tasks for you to do, always was getting you to run around after him. The moment he died, you didn't have to live in survival mode anymore, but your body was used to living in survival mode. That's all you've ever done. So the moment that effectively your father was your tiger and he did go away, but you didn't recognize him as a tiger. You thought he was a squirrel. I have to use the word squirrel because that's a good contrast to a tiger. And because of that, your body doesn't understand why. Like, you're trying to relax, your body's trying to relax, but then it's almost like when you've fallen asleep and then you wake up suddenly.
Yeah.
Like you're waking up suddenly is your panic attacks, because your body's trying to relax because your tiger's gone away,
but you're like, don't recognize that was the thing, that was the issue, that was the problem. And so you're then fighting like to stay awake. No, I'm fighting. I want to be in survival mode because something might get me, because I don't know if it was that. It could be something else.
Yeah, I went for breakfast with Hannah the other day, who was, I don't know if she's still here, but who commented earlier, and we were talking about a situation with her and the fact that and this is why people stay or repeat patterns, that it's almost easier living in that pattern, like going back to that living, so it's easier
Because it's what you're used to.
What you're used to. So do you remember when we did that course we had to do before we got Hunter?
Yeah.
And something that there's many things actually that struck me on that course, but one of the things that always stayed with me is when they talked about children that were coming from physically abusive, like violent families, right? And what they said you have to look out for is that it is very common for a child who comes from a background like that, even if they were very young, to ruin nice situations or to so they said what is really common is like you can go out for the day and have like a really nice day and then come back and the child like then smashes the house up, and there's like people just don't understand it. And there's also this, like, you know, you can be going along and it's really nice and then all of a sudden the child just acts crazy. And what it is when you live in that violent, so what happens when you live with someone who's violent in that way is they're violent, and then you have the calm and then the apology and the love.
Yeah.
And so what that child eventually learns is the calm and the love is danger. Because what's
going to happen next.
Because what's next is the violence.
So they're trying to avoid that.
And that is the pattern. So they create the chaos themselves. They control it themselves.
That is a form of control. Yeah. You're trying to control the situation. They're trying to change the pattern.
Yeah. And so, you know, just on my level, although I wasn't going around smashing our house up or like, but my body, like, so suddenly my dad's not here anymore and I don't need to be that daughter anymore. And but you know, my body is just, and every time I, you know, would like sit down and watch TV or whatever, my body was just like, danger, that's dangerous, like, because there, you know, there must be the phone call coming soon, or the, you know, none of it, that's a conscious
the list
thought.
Of jobs he's going to give you for tomorrow,
or whatever. There's that feeling. So yeah, anyway, what I wanted to say about the perfectionism and the responsibility thing, this bout of anxiety this time and all the tools that I've used and still used and all of that, I think I've ditched this now, and it's thanks to that anxiety. Like if I hadn't have had the anxiety to make me, like, because what happened is I got so poorly with the anxiety, I couldn't be a perfectionist anymore, and I couldn't take on the responsibilities.
That's like burnt that out of your brain.
So it broke that. Because I'm not a perfectionist anymore. Because look, because
that wasn't true. That wasn't you. That was an installed part from him.
Yeah.
So when he died, I think it. I'm not saying that it broke immediately, but it didn't
break immediately. But yeah,
it burned that switch almost.
Yeah. So like before, I'd have been mortified that I hadn't got that link right, and I would have had to correct it and
apologize personally to each and every one of you.
Yeah, and like, whereas instead, like, I'm just like, well, it has to wait. I've got other stuff going on. And responsibility wise, I know I didn't send that YouTube link out, and that I'm potentially letting people down. But I've just learned like that. Yeah, I just don't carry that same weight.
Anxiety is supposed to be a brief journey with an on and off switch.
Yeah.
And anxiety, I think, essentially is where people have a broken off switch, whereby they get the anxiety is switched on and then it doesn't ever turn off.
Should we talk about turning it off?
So that's what we're going to talk about, is turning it off. Do you find you don't practice perfectionism, but it's still there? However, you find yourself saying, "I'm no longer a perfectionist."
No, yes and no. So I think you can get conscientiousness mixed up with perfectionism. So I'm very so there's a test which we'll probably talk about at some point called the ocean test. And it tells you how conscientious you are, how neurotic you are. It's like one of those personality things, but a very good psychological one. So I score very high on the conscientious level. And so, that will drive me to do a good solid job and to not let people down and all of that. But no, that is broken in me now. I can't care enough.
You're almost anti-perfectionist now. Like you don't want to be that on purpose.
Like I can't care enough now. Because I guess I know it's fruitless. Whereas before, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Like I guess
it's not going to come to anything.
Yeah.
You can't be perfect, so it's a pointless endeavor.
Well, and before though, I was chasing that to always be on the right side of my dad.
Yes, well, because he expected that or demanded it of you.
Yeah. So so now it's fruitless because my dad isn't there, so I don't have to do that. And even though I didn't have to do that, that relationship, that bond between an abuser and an abused, like, I came home, didn't I, one day from the nursing home and said, the only way, because everyone's like, why don't you stop going? Like, you can just cut him out of your life. He's in a nursing home now. And I understand why, more so now, why some people don't leave domestic violent relationships and things like that. Like, it just seems so obvious. Leave that crappy partner. But the hold they have over you, like he had such a hold over me, and like even just walking away from that and how he would judge me on that and the things that he would think, like, was just too much for me to bear. And I knew that the only way I'd ever break free is if he died or I died. And at one point, he looked like he was going to live till he was 100, didn't it?
Yeah, we really thought he was going to live to 100. He lived to 80 as it was, but we really thought he'd live to 100.
And I don't know what I'd have done then.
And that would have been like sod's law, wouldn't it? Like your mum died at 62 and he would have lived to 100. But anyway, didn't happen.
No. So yeah, I don't practice perfectionism now, but I'm still very conscientious. So have a think about, the difference. Maybe you might find that it's to do with that.
So let's got a few more things to talk about. Known things that help with anxiety, starting with the physical side. So this is what they would recommend that you do. And I can't remember who did this. Did an online, like, I don't know, it was like a TED talk or something I watched about anxiety and about blah blah blah. And they did research on the physical side and what you could physically do. So what they recommend you do, and I've not tried this because I don't have anxiety. So try it if you have anxiety and tell me if it helps you. You're supposed to stretch out all your limbs for a few minutes. So just do stretches of all your limbs and all the components of your body. Then sit comfortably and focus on a muscle group, right? So like your shoulders or your torso, whatever muscle group, and you're supposed to go sort of like, you could do bottom to top or top to bottom. And what you do is you tense whatever muscle group you're working on for 10 seconds, and you focus on the feeling of the tight and the tense feeling of that. So really tense up everything and focus on that feeling, right?
I've done this before, actually.
Then you let go of the tension and relax, and you notice and feel the difference between the two extremes for 20 seconds. As you relax the muscles, exhale and actually say out loud, relax. And this to create awareness of your body and your control over your body. It helps your control feelings, right? So if you are suffering from anxiety, it could be the physical side of anxiety, it could be the physical leg of anxiety, as it were. So try that out and see if that helps. I've done a little list. I know you're going to talk about this more than me, but I've done it because you've got experience of anxiety and things that help and don't. These are things which are recommended. So you've got the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, okay, and there's various things they can ask you to do under that. For example, tapping, right, which is where you do all this tapping thing. right? For the full details of all these things, it's best just to go online because it's all on there, right? But these are things that they recommend that you do: tapping, journaling. That's come up again. CBD oil. So petting animals. So I don't know how you could borrow an animal if you didn't have an animal, but animals in general are good for anxiety. Meditation, exercise is meant to be the number one thing that you can do. Any exercise, walking, if that's all you can do, or swimming, or walking the dog, whatever exercise that you want to do. Aromatherapy. So obviously you do a bit of that with Hebs on the Hill. You've got the Hebs on the Hill stuff that help you. Whatever things that help with anxiety that you know, put it in the comments. Laura said you could have a stuffed animal, yeah. So keep taxidermists alive and buy an animal from there.
Well, although a cuddly toy actually is a thing, which I'm going to talk about.
Wow, your brain don't know the difference, believe it or not.
No. So what did you just say then that made me? Oh, it's just had a thought and then it's gone out of my head.
Tapping, journaling, CBD oil, animals, meditation, exercise.
Meditation.
Oh, yeah.
So that tensing thing that you're on about, I've tried that as opposed to meditation. So if your anxiety is really quite intense, meditation is just off the cards because you're not in that kind of
you kind of
frame of mind.
have to be relaxed to do meditation.
Yeah. So meditation. So I'm going to give you 2 toolkits here. I'm going to give you a toolkit of things that I have found that help in panic attacks specifically, but also would work for very high levels of anxiety when everything's gone too far. So like they recommend like you do all this and you count colors but I was trying all this stuff and then I suddenly realized I was too far. I was too far down the line for that stuff to work. And then the second toolkit is stuff that you can do every day, sort of, to keep anxiety at bay. Okay. So preventative and cure as such. And meditation is more preventative and the cure is more the tensing, although again I would say if it's really high or you're at panic attack stage, then that's probably not going to work.
It's more like
a
just
middle ground.
Focusing on keeping in control of your heartbeat or something would be better.
Yeah, well, and so it works because it calms down your parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
Starting with, I want to start with panic attacks first, because and very high levels of anxiety. So the tiger thing that you were saying about, so that obviously that was what was happening with me. And if you remember when I had that really bad panic attack, I led on the floor. Do you remember? And then I went in the kitchen and led on the floor. And then I sat in the shower with the shower on the floor. And that was the wrong thing to do. Walk. Exercise. The best thing I have found is if my anxiety is starting to bubble or if I'm having the start of a panic attack, I can actually stop my panic attack dead now by pacing quite rapidly. And that makes sense to me because back in the day, if you saw a tiger, you're on about the on-off switch. If you saw a tiger, you're going to fight that tiger, right? Or you're going to run. And you need adrenaline for both. And so when you're having a panic attack, you have an adrenaline rush, and that's what can make you feel quite poorly. So the last thing you feel you feel poorly, you want to lie down, but actually you need to disperse that adrenaline.
Yes, you need to link your body and mind together.
Yeah, and so walking,
recreate the connection.
Yeah, so walking is burning that adrenaline off, and then I believe that probably then you do so much of that walking, then your body goes, "Oh, we're safe now."
Yeah, there was a physical threat because you've moved away from it.
Yeah, yeah.
You can sort of, it's like a trick almost. Like obviously, there wasn't a physical threat, but it kind of like can trick your body into thinking, "Oh well, I've done something about this physical threat. I've walked away from it."
Yeah. I mean, I've never smashed them up or punched something, but I bet that would have the same effect. I bet that would stop the panic attack.
I'll throw in the mix as well that for me personally, I can't meditate in a quiet room peacefully, but I can meditate if I'm walking. So I walk. I used to walk to work an hour. It used to take me to get to work, and I would, if you'd come and spoke to me, and this actually happened, by the way, if you'd come and spoke to me, I would be so in my own brain that I wouldn't even recognize you, whoever you are. I had a friend from work, as I was walking home from work. Sort of, he was not in work that day, and he sort of came across the road, and he went, Dan, 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 and I was so in my own meditation thought process that my brain just reacted really weird and just went, "You're not there, go away," sort of thing. I just ignored him completely, and to the point where I even forgot that event happened. And he reminded me about 3 years later. He went like, "Do you remember that weird time when I came over to you and you just..." And then it all came back to me. But until he said it, I didn't even remember that it even happened. I was so deeply in a meditation in my brain, because when I walk, I meditate. So for some people, if you can't meditate, if you're one of those people that just cannot sit and quiet their brain and cannot sit and think in that way or meditate in that way, because they try and say clear your mind and all that, but you can actually meditate without clearing your mind. You don't have to go through that kind of meditation. If you want to go into a deep thought meditation, do it by walking. Walk somewhere you like to walk. So somewhere nice to look at, somewhere where there's trees or water, or somewhere nice to look at, and you can meditate on the move. Anyway, that can help. That could help with anxiety.
So with a high level of anxiety or panic attack, move rapidly. I mean, I'm not breaking into a jog, but you've
God,
seen
no,
me
not going to break into a jog for anything.
But preventative walk.
Preventative walk.
Yeah, so there's, walking works for both. So if you're going to a social situation and you're feeling that, like, then go somewhere you can pace for a bit, like, for example. The other thing I wanted to say, I've got more to give you, but it changed me. Like, these panic attacks have changed me, and this anxiety has changed me, and that's okay. Like, this is the thing, is I think as well, the thing I had to learn was that I'm not the same person. Like, I kept trying to return to myself, didn't I? And I kept trying to be the person I was before. Well, I can't be the person I was before. A, because of the experiences anyway, and B, it changes you. So taking that pressure off myself.
Returning to the same river on a different day is not the same river.
No. Ooh. I used to say to myself, "You are safe, you are safe, you are safe, you are safe," over and over again. Physical touch can help. So, I used to get you to press on me. I used to sit in front of you and I needed your pressure on my back. So a weighted blanket, a cuddly toy that you can squeeze, and even a self hug are things that help. Grounding, so feet on the ground and feeling the ground, getting barefoot, and if you can, getting on different texture of, so maybe outside if you've got a cold floor, like that kind of stuff. Audio, last week I said there's audio that's known to reduce anxiety by 65%, so there's that, which I can send out. I bought myself a large leopardolite, yeah, I think that's how you pronounce it, crystal. I meant to bring it actually. So it's like, but I haven't touched it for ages. It's like this big, and it's meant to help with anxiety. Now, I don't know, that, like, the whole thing with crystals is about their vibrations and stuff. But even as somebody, if you don't believe in crystals helping you, the weight, the coldness, again, clenching around something. Like, I used to just sit and pass it, and I used to put it, so you've got your vagus nerve here, which if you can activate that, you can calm yourself down. I used to lay it on this part of my chest. This was all, believe it or not, just sat in my room with the TV on, like just a normal evening. But I used to have to do all of this just to, like, survive. having a shower. Now, there is something known as the diving reflex. So if you're having a really bad anxious moment, a panic attack, and you can put your face in cold water, submerge your face and then come back up, it activates something called the diving reflex, and that will activate your parasympathetic nervous system and take you out of anxiety.
No, I've not heard of that one.
Yeah. I had some air putty stuff, which I used to make shapes with. Again, that's when I think back to those times, what I'm thinking, what my body is remembering is, and it's funny that you did that tensing thing, is the gripping, the tensing in my hands. Like, so I was like using that kind of
kneading like a cat.
Yeah, like this kind of motion to cope with the anxiety. I had a game on my phone, a jigsaw game, which in going out for meals and things like that, sometimes I just couldn't look up and like be in the room, but I could listen. So sometimes I would do a jigsaw on my phone to try and cope with a situation. Sipping water. So that's a known thing to help. Because again, when you're sipping water, that's an actual survival thing. So it sends a different signal to your brain when you're sipping water. So I went for a lot of water. Obviously, aromatherapy oils.
That sipping water reminds me like when you put is it butter on a cat's paw or something to get it to lick its paws? So
Yeah.
it thinks when you move house, you want the cat to lick its paws, and then it considers that house to be its house.
Yeah.
So you put something on their paw so they lick it, and then you can trick them into living there and not wandering off.
Yeah.
We should have done that with our cat.
Well, I think we should have run off. Chasing a squirrel, like literally. Now, this is Dan's going to be mortified that I'm mentioning this, but I just want to say it because I didn't realize it was a thing. And again, for me, if I could just make someone feel more normal or less anxious about certain things. So
Go on.
So when a tiger used to come to attack us, right, we would have a big rush of adrenaline to run away. And then what the body would do is it would clear itself of all its fluids.
Oh, God.
So you would be running away whilst...
Remember that whole embarrassment thing we mentioned earlier?
You'd be running away whilst literally shitting yourself because you'd be lighter, you'd be faster, all of this kind of stuff. So I suffered with such bad diarrhea with like that was and that gives me a marker now for how anxious I am in a way, like because I don't have that anymore. So I just wanted to mention that if you're suffering with your bowels, like that's why it's a natural response, and that might be a warning sign for you that you're over anxious. Like if you're not very good at reading your anxiety, but suddenly you have a random bout of diarrhea, you are probably more anxious than you realize.
That's okay. What's Chloe say? You've got to read the messages, remember?
Oh, yeah. I tap my fingers and thumb one at a time, counting a times table in my head on each tap. I'm crap at times tables, so my brain really has to focus. So it's not focusing on the situation.
Yeah, distraction.
Yeah, very good.
Well, that's the same as what you're doing with the jigsaw.
With the jigsaw, yeah. I used to do a game with names. So I'd pick boy or girl, or if I didn't want a challenge, I could do both. So say I pick boy, so then I'd start with A. So then I'd pick a boy's name, Aaron, and then what that name ended with. N.
Oh, that. You used to try and get me to play that game.
Yeah, then I had to think of a boy's name like Nigel, and then L, Leo, and then O, Oliver, and then R, Robert.
You make
really
yourself
good at this game.
You make yourself so annoyed that you can't possibly be anxious and annoyed at the same time.
But like, because it makes you think, doesn't it? Like, and we did it with place
Makes
names.
me think I don't like games.
So those were all the things that I did, and still do. Well, the only thing I do now, the only thing I have to do now, really, is walk, isn't it? when a panic attack comes,
Mm.
I just go.
That's the go-to
pace.
for you, isn't it? Walking.
Yeah. The other stuff I don't need anymore.
But isn't that what they used to say? You used to always, if you had a row or if you had any kind of situation where you needed to think, the recommended thing to do was to go out for a walk, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it's not like I needed to think. I'm in the middle of a panic attack, like where I feel like I'm going to die.
No, but it's like walking seems to be some kind of fix-all for humans.
Yeah, like an apple a day.
Yeah, it's one of them things.
So long-term things that I've done. So this is the preventative stuff. I have learned that I needed a lot more rest than I ever anticipated.
Mm.
So I have learned that
A lot of people struggle with this.
Yeah, that my anxiety can be triggered purely because I'm tired. I'm too tired. So going back to that perfectionism and going back to that over responsibility, when I learned that I needed a lot more rest than I've ever needed. And I think that's because also you're not just talking about anxiety. If you're suffering from anxiety, you've probably got adrenal fatigue. So then you've got to recover from adrenal fatigue, which can take 2 to 5 years.
And I think if you burn yourself out in anything, you reduce your capacity for that thing permanently.
Yeah.
I think, if we put a number on it and say you had a capacity of 100 to do whatever thing you did, if you burn yourself out in that task, your new capacity for that will be lower than 100, say it'll be 80, whatever. So that means that you can burn out quicker than you could before, and you have to realign what you can do in that certain thing to match your new score, if you like. Otherwise, you'll burn yourself out quicker than you did last time, and it'll keep reducing your overall capacity for that thing.
Do you know that kind of happens with diets, doesn't it? Like the first time you do a diet, it's like
The most successful, and then
score 100. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot more rest, and so that means I've had to ditch the perfectionism. I've had to ditch the over responsibility because otherwise, the anxiety is increased, and I don't want to live my life like that.
you've had to be a better time manager.
Yeah. And another thing that links with that is I've needed better boundaries.
Mm.
And I would think
Yes,
I would put money on the fact that pretty much everybody that is suffering from anxiety, that recognizes the stuff that we've said, probably needs better boundaries in their life.
Now, if you, again, we're going to have to link it with narcissism. If you've got a relationship with a narcissist, your boundaries are probably going to be pretty bad, because narcissists, their number one skill probably is that they're very good at arranging your boundaries to their level where they like them, which is non-existent.
Yeah. So these are preventative things. So I still need more rest than ever. I still need to maintain boundaries. And so I said no a lot more. I've relaxed about letting people down. I've realized I can't let people down that truly matter. I say no, like I said, to things. The other thing as well is asking people for help. So
Yeah.
I have, good friends. I have you guys on here. I have, friends in life. I've got mum friends. I've got you. And I've learned to be better at asking for help. And what I would say about asking for help is it's the same principle as what I said about when you're trying to control people because you're anxious and that you're robbing them of those experiences. When think about when someone asks you for help, like if you've offered to help, or someone knows that you're a person that will help them, when they ask you for help, it gives you a warm glow. It gives you a purpose. It gives you, it doesn't make you like.
There's actually a lot of people out there who like helping people, so let them help you. Be one of those people that gives them that good feeling.
Don't rob them. Don't rob them of that feeling. So I've really tried to lean into that, and I ask for help when I need.
You do ask for help more. I've noticed that.
Yeah. Journaling. I do journaling. Aromatherapy. So I've got my calm balm, my calming mist. So I make sure I'm quite religious actually at night, putting on my like herbs on the hill stuff. To like calm me down.
Yeah.
So I took supplements, ashwagandha and 5-HTP. I take them from a company called British Supplements that I wouldn't trust any other. But do your research, have a look round. I put letting go of perfectionism. There's a
there
thing
you
here.
go.
I researched about the parasympathetic nervous system and delved into that kind of stuff as well. I'm not on social media as much, and I don't watch TV. I only read. Now, that is not a conscious thing, but I believe our conversation. So I've struggled to be on social media. And I love my social media family. But I really just struggle to put content out there these days. And yet I'm the open book that I am. And also, I haven't turned a TV on for I don't know when. And I used to struggle, didn't I? And I had that really bad panic attack when we were watching TV. I wonder, little theory I'm going to throw out there. I wonder if TV and social media is too stimulating, too dangerous for my nervous system at this point in time.
Yeah, well, a lot of the stuff on TV, I mean, I don't get anxious about it, but I get upset about it.
Well, yeah. And we were watching something that's fake, but it's a bit like the lemon, isn't it? The experiment we did in our very first podcast is your brain doesn't know the difference. So if I'm watching someone be murdered, and that's the kind of stuff I like watching,
how many murders it got?
Yeah. So whereas reading's different, right? I would think possibly.
Yeah, well, it's your own imagination. I think it's different. Yeah, I think it's different.
So that's my little theory, is that at the moment those things are too stimulating for me. So yeah. So those are the things that I do still. I'm still reading. I still take supplements. I've changed my supplements slightly. Letting go of perfectionism, less social media, more rest, more boundaries.
I think that list is a comprehensive, broad list that should cover every human being on the planet.
And
at least one of those.
I take medication.
And you also take medication.
So it was that or going to an asylum, it felt like. And so very much against my will, I went to the doctors and I went on sertraline, which I've been on before. I had massive anxiety about going on sertraline. I don't really like medication. That's why
you've gone on
supplements.
You've gone on it, but you've got a sort of with a plan to come off it straight, like as quickly as you can.
Well,
when you feel able to do so.
Yeah, so I'm on a fairly low dose, considering that I've got diagnosed PTSD and chronic panic disorder. So I'm actually on a low dose, really, because so I still get, as you know, I can still get a panic attack. Now, I think what happens is a lot of GPs just get you to a point where you don't feel anymore, almost whereas I still can have those feelings, but I know now what to do. And I quite like living on that edge. That sounds weird, but
if you take a really high dose, it just completely suppresses and dulls all feeling, good or bad.
Yeah.
And obviously, the point of living is to live. It's not to survive.
No.
So I think you've done the right thing in that you rather than just be dumped on medication for the rest of your life, it's with a plan to come off the medication. And I think it's good psychologically to have a plan to come off it rather than just sort of like, well, this is my life now. And if you're one of these people who's been on medication for 20 years or whatever, this is each to their own, isn't it? Everyone's got their own sort of individual
don't judge medication. That's just my personal
But we're talking about you and your mentality and who you are and what you want to do.
Yeah.
And as I say, each to their own. So
yeah, and for me, medication is literally like the crutch that I needed.
It's taking the edge off it.
I could no longer, if we're going to go physical example, my legs were no longer working on their own. I couldn't get about. I needed that extra crutch. Now I don't want to live with this crutch because I know my legs are good enough. So I'm now doing the physiotherapy. So this is the thing. I think some people, they take the medication that is very much needed, and I highly, recommend.
It's
it's helped me a lot. There's no shame in it, but then they don't necessarily do this work
Then-
for the anxiety.
Yeah,
because
they rely on the chemical rather than develop anything else
yeah,
that can remove the chemical
one day.
one day.
Yeah.
And so it's it's so easy because the doctors are useless in that regard, aren't they? They just want to get rid of you, don't they? So they just, here's a pill, go away, I don't want to ever see you again, sort of thing.
Well,
Rather than, let's delve into this issue, find out where it comes from, and develop alternative methods of dealing with it. But while you're doing that, you need help to live day to day. So here's some medication to deal with it on the day to day, and we're going to try and get a plan together where we can get you to come off this so that you don't rely on it for the free forever. Because if you do break your leg, they don't just say, well, that's it, your leg's broken for the rest of your life, here's a crutch, you'll need this forever, and disappear, I never want to see you again. They say, right, you need rehabilitation, you've got to set the bone, then you've got to walk on it, you've got to use your leg to keep the strength in it, and then eventually the cast comes off, and the crutch is thrown away, and you're expected to walk again. Because it's physical and you can see it versus it's mental, so you can't see it. And so the difference is also, well, you can't see it, so we can hide it, sort of thing. The doctor's perspective.
If only they treated mental health like that. Like, you remember my finger, right?
Mm.
So I broke this bone here. There's a scar there, and I had my finger it was basically 18 months, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I had to at one point I had to go every single day. Then I had to go every single once a week to this therapy thing, physiotherapy. I had to have my hand in a light thing. I had all these splints, and I had so much
And
support.
your hands were like that, like Edward Scissorhands.
Oh my god, it was awful, wasn't it? And I still can't work them fully properly.
No.
But I mean, at one point I couldn't even grip. But yeah, so there was so much work done, 18 months of work done physically on my hand.
But the response to PTSD and anxiety is, here's a chemical, disappear.
Yeah, like I was just thinking then it'd be a year in January since I've started taking that medication, and every time I put my repeat prescription in, they just grant it. They don't want to see me again. They haven't asked to see me
again. And they always
again.
do that for the next 20, 30 years, whatever.
Yeah. And also, I just think that some people are on anxiety medication, but they still fundamentally they're still suffering.
Yeah.
And so I think that this could explain why, and so I hope this helps.
Well, that's what I think. Doing
I'm not
this
suffering.
is supposed to approach the subject head on.
Yeah.
And these are the things that it can be. These are all the things that feed it and support it, and these are things that may help resolve it, rather than take a chemical and suppress it for as long as you can. And if the dose ain't right, just up the dose. And then all your other things, because if anxiety is the problem, well, there might be joy in your life in other aspects, but you're suppressing that joy. And I'm not saying obviously you're doing this on purpose, but that joy is being suppressed, and you're being completely leveled out, rather than having those moments that make the difference in life.
Yeah, and for God's sake, I wouldn't recommend coming off your medication. Like, do not take this as like, come off your meds. Like, not that.
Speak to your doctor first.
Speak to your doctor. No, consult your doctor. But think about some of these tools that we've mentioned.
Maybe attempt. Your GP may or may not be interested. I don't know, but maybe you might have to do it, or maybe there's someone who sort of like might be good at this sort of thing, where you can come up with, right, let's try these different things. Let's create some kind of plan where I can sort of reduce my reliance on the chemical side and up my reliance on other things that can help, and see if I can develop a way to get off it. Again, consult your doctor, all that stuff to stop me getting sued.
Well, and also just don't even try first cutting it down. Like, do these things. Because I truly believe, hand on heart, that you would feel better within a few weeks, like from where you are now.
Yeah.
Like, I just think that
it's the machine gun approach, right? One of these bullets is going to hit you.
Well, and that's what I did, wasn't it? I did machine gun my
anxiety.
Did
every single thing that you could do, and then some things worked, didn't it? And that's what you got to do, is find out what works for you.
What I've not got on here is all the things that didn't work.
Yes.
There is a whole list of things that didn't work for me.
Like, don't give up. Like, you might have had advice in the beginning. Oh, do this, do the other. and then you tried it and it didn't work, so I'll just be on the chemicals. It is a lot easier, isn't it? Like, you just got to pop the pill at the right time, whatever. But maybe now might be time to revisit it, look at it again, and with fresh eyes, and try these different things, all the different things, and maybe, just maybe, you might find something that helps you or works for you, and it might be the thing that can help you manage this without the chemical. Because obviously all these chemicals have side effects, apart from the whole suppressing the good aspects of life, the good feelings that you may have, they get suppressed along with everything else. But it can also have other side effects, and maybe you can avoid those side effects. Some people are on 2 or 3 sets of pills because one set of pills create side effects that the other pills then have to deal with. Those pills are, and it's all a bit of a mess. I don't know if they know what they're doing, really, sometimes.
I know, debatable. Laura said, how long did your PTSD diagnosis take? So I had 2 doctor's consultations and a phone call from like a mental health person who asked me loads and loads of questions, and I had an online thing I had to fill in, and then that was that. I have got a previous PTSD diagnosis on my record though, so I don't know if that, I know that had a bearing on what they prescribed me and the fact that, it was happening again. Right, love.
All right, shall we wrap up?
Yeah. What are we doing next week?
So next week, we're going to do some tarot-related talking.
Yes. So we're going to talk about tarot cards, and Dan's going to bring his scientifically how tarot cards work, right?
I'm gonna a theory on how they work, and also a scientific approach to it, but also a little bit of mysticism.
Are you
bring some mysticism?
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to talk about the actual. I'm not going to go into the vast detail because it would be like 7 hours, right? But I'm going to go into a little brief thing about where the tarot comes from and what it actually means.
Yeah, and then I've got a little like Christmas gift, haven't I? A little Christmas tarot gift that I'm gonna mention next week.
Mention it next week, yeah,
because that's our last one. That's our last podcast.
We're having Christmas
next
off
week, and then we'll be back in January, won't we?
Yeah, we're gonna have Christmas and New Year, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not having it off because of me.
Not off.
Me tarot treat.
Offline. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're done, aren't we?
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. If you want to support us, our links are on after the show. And contact us for anything or whatever. If you've got any suggestions for future show topics, let us know. Thanks for watching. We really appreciate it.
We do. Thanks, guys. Have a good week. Mwah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.